Welcome to Leaders in the Arena. My name is Jenny Whitener. I'm the CEO of Bridge Innovate. And for over 20 years, we've partnered with leaders to solve problems and build leadership capabilities. This series, Leaders in the Arena, is designed to share valuable insights and lessons from our clients and our network as inspiration for other leaders in the arena. So we are glad that you are with us today. Bridge Innovate is focused on empowering teams to lead, think, and problem solve differently. We offer a variety of consulting services, future lab sprints, designing new capabilities enabled by generative AI, and leadership and team development programs. And of course, we have a great studio. You can see that in the back behind me today. We'd love to have you here in the Chattanooga area to enjoy our studio with us. But what's most important today, we have a very special guest talking about leveraging learning and development for business growth and innovation. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jonna Van Thiel. Dr. Van Thiel is a vice president at Kenco Logistics and has an extremely rich background in learning and development. So let me just share a little bit of introduction with you for Jonna, and then I'll let her add to that. So Jonna has been with Kenco for well over 6 years, having multiple roles in the people development and learning and development talent acquisition capability areas, taking them through a very high growth phase. She's also has her Ph.D. in organizational behavior and organizational psychology from Capella University, and then her master's degree from Purdue. Wouldn't surprise you that she's an adjunct professor there at Purdue doing teaching with the university, and then also adjunct here locally, an adjunct instructor with the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. So she just stays very busy, not only giving of her time in her professional role at Kenco, but then also giving back and building future leaders in the talent field. So Jonna, welcome, and thank you being here today, for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. I am super excited to be here. I really have been honored to gain experience across the organizational development field. And after, I can't believe 20 years, over 20 years in the industry, I've learned a lot, some through successes and many of those through failures. But I appreciate and love the opportunity to come and share some of those insights that I have gained from my experience.
Well, great. And I know today we wanted to really deeply sort of look in the field of learning and development and its impact on business. So let's just start right there. Let's start with this question around how can learning and development initiatives align with the organizational business goals to drive growth? Now, people know it's focused on building talent, but how can it drive growth for the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think it starts with alignment, and that starts with understanding and clarity. L&D should be strategically integrated within the business objectives and goals, not just merely a supportive function. I think by starting the understanding of business key objectives, we as a L&D area can start looking at growth opportunities, operational gaps, innovation goals, and be able to align the programs and the support that's needed that is part of the overall strategy.
I couldn't agree with you more. The alignment phase, I think, is so important, and how we're understanding the business objectives, how we're understanding the barriers to growth, and then connecting all those things through the talent development and L&D capability. Many times when you're at that business level and you're working with a senior executive team and you're asking for funding on L&D, they'll go, well, so what's the ROI on this thing? Can how do we know that this investment's really contributing to our bottom line? And so what's been your tactics, sort of what are your guidance for others in terms of bringing forth good measurable impacts in terms of investment for L&D?
Yeah, that's a great topic. We could probably do a whole webinar on the ROI of L&D programs. But it's interesting because I take a step back and I've heard it many, many years ago, and it really tried to change the verbiage within my team of instead of talking about ROI as they do in, business terms, really to discuss and be able to communicate and articulate the impact. So what does the organization actually gain through the development of the people? So focusing in on what is that, right? So tying the learning outcomes to business outcomes.
Mhm.
So not just learning metrics, right? So this is beyond participation rates, beyond, pre-test, post-test scores, but it really is about measuring behavioral change, looking at performance improvement, and ultimately being able to partner with business operations and look at what is the impact, the overall impact to the business, which then, right, when we use metrics such as, whether we're looking at productivity or sales or reduce error rates, customer satisfaction, all of those things, if there's clear learning objectives in programs, then it's easier to tie in that impact to those specific things from a business perspective. I think another kind of viewpoint or way to look at it is, modeling a cost savings. Because, when you look at ROI, it's not just what is, the profitability of the business based on the development, but what is it that we're actually helping the business maybe reduce costs in some areas, right? So L&D programs that are aligned with business objectives are 9 times more effective, right? Compared to, kind of that weak alignment. And so looking at a well-run L&D program doesn't just produce individuals who are more productive or they can get up to speed faster. But when you start looking at the reduction in hiring cost, right? Because you're able to promote from within and retain that internal knowledge, you're also able to accelerate innovation, which we all know innovation is extremely important to stay competitive in today's market. So looking at how does L&D not just help a company stay profitable, but what also, does it do from a business perspective as far as operational support?
Right. That's amazing. 9 times. You said 9 times more
Yeah.
impactful. So, when you talk about this alignment and getting the measurement closer to the business outcome or the impact in business terms, right? It makes me also think about the importance and measurement of engaging the learner
Mhm.
and their manager in going through that measurement process. So it's not the L&D organization on their own trying to, cobble together or go after these assessments and these impact analysis, but actually let the learner own their own
Mhm.
outcome measurement or along with their manager. Like have you had thoughts about how does that all come together?
Well, I think it really starts with creating the partnership inside the business. And I have said this countless times that I do feel honored to work for an organization that values L&D, but also we have leaders inside of our organization that are our frontline leaders that understand the need for development. And they're the ones reaching out to us, right? They're the ones coming to us and saying, hey, we need help with this. And by doing that, we're able to work closely with them in order to ensure that what we're developing or what we're customizing or what we're providing really is going to be helpful to them and ultimately make the impact that they need for the business.
Great point. Great points. When you think about getting managers involved, I can't help but think about this concept of retention. And today, I mean, we're certainly in a different marketplace than we were 18, 20 months ago when talent was so tight. But talk a little bit about retention and how learning and development impacts retention, because we know even if it's a little bit softer of a talent market, the productivity gains, the impact of actually retaining people on the overall business performance is still significant. So talk about the relationship between these two entities, retention and L&D.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you recently read the 2024 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. It has some good information in there. But I remember seeing that I believe it was 70% of respondents said that learning improves their sense of connection to an organization. and 80% said it adds purpose to their work. So, thinking about being able to provide growth opportunities, it really becomes a magnet, right? Like L&D becomes a magnet of people wanting to stay, but then also high performers wanting to come to an organization that offers development for their people. Because people see clear learning and growth pathways in order to increase their performance, right? In order to increase their productivity and ultimately increase their livelihood, right? So being able to offer upskilling, reskilling opportunities really communicates to the people that the organization is investing in them and really fuels that the engagement, but also the loyalty to the organization. And we've seen lots of Gallup reports that talk about how engagement is directly tied to productivity and customer experience, and the list goes on and on and on. But one of the things that happens during offering development and during this growth of an individual is building a connection with them, because engagement is ultimately the outcome. So it's like, what does L&D, or what can L&D do to create that outcome of engagement? And that's creating those connections through being vulnerable during that learning process. So it builds the trust. And then we all know turnover is very expensive. Lots of data that shows that. But L&D can help lower that cost by strengthening that loyalty, the trust to the organization, and ultimately the employer brand, and then attract that top talent that's coming in.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I mean, wonderful concepts for us to consider, because so much of the research today around what employees are looking for is this purpose driven, the sense of connection. And I think, there's so much pressure to perform, that having that opportunity to learn together, to build connection in a purposeful way, what a great combination, like 2 for 1, right?
Exactly.
And then I think going beyond that, just talking about how learning is beginning to permeate throughout the workplace. I mean, could be learning through conferences or gatherings. It could be learning on the job, learning at your desktop, learning in small team groups, learning on the job, just in the moment. And so all of those opportunities providing that time for connection and purpose-enabled work. This other point that you brought up, I think it's just important to make a moment here. You talked about vulnerability and the impact of vulnerability on trust. And I hadn't thought about that before. And so I want to thank you for bringing that forward, because so often the research is so clear. So often organizations are saying, how do I build a more trust-based organization? Because all the data shows that organizations or teams that have high degrees of trust are faster, they're better, they're more innovative, they're happier, right? All those attributes that we want, we strive for those of us who are involved in leading talent. But one of the critical components of trust is having vulnerability. And so I love the fact that you've connected that. And it is so true that when we're in a learning environment, we're all there just saying, we don't know it all. Right?
Exactly.
We're here to get better. And so just our presence in and of itself says we're a bit vulnerable, and we just sort of lean into that and invite people to learn and practice along the way in that L&D environment. Great connection. I hadn't thought of that. Thank you. That was a winner. So I'm just continuing to invite everyone. I know that it's posted in the chat, but as we go through our conversation today, if you do have questions that you would like to post, for those of you who are joining us live, please post those in the chat. Or if you want to just comment about some of the things that Jonna and I are talking about, please do so, and we'll reference that at the end of today's session. So thanks to everyone who's joining us live. Let's keep going. And talk a little bit more about learning and development in a kind of a broader construct. We've talked about it in business growth. We've talked about it in terms of employee retention. But I'd like to hear your thoughts more around L&D, around the influence on culture, and even going deeper, just the culture in terms of a continuous learning environment. Some might talk about it, Adam Grant would say, be curious, the aspect of leaning into curiosity and its impact on innovation and our ability to be competitive. Talk about learning culture and it's this concept of fostering innovation. Talk about how that threads together.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a very firm believer that a strong learning culture, right, becomes a competitive advantage. I think it's reframing of how do we outlearn the competition, right? Like, how do we help our people um, get those up to date skills and have the confidence in learning new skills, new tools, or processes at a faster rate so that we can be agile, so that as the business has to move based on the competitive market, that our people are equipped with what they have in order to do that. I think continuous learning really is grounded in being able to adapt to change faster. So, whether we're talking about AI disruption or differing shifts or customer demands changes from one day to the next, I know a lot of our customers tend to do that. But being able to equip our people with the skill set to learn in the moment, to have a safe environment for that to happen. We know that innovation thrives in that, right? And so being able to give them the skill set, the tools, and then the space for them to innovate, where learning is safe, it's encouraged, and then ultimately it becomes expected because the environment is set up that way for the business to encourage people to fail fast, but learn from their mistakes and be able to identify what are those skills that they do need to continue to move forward and continue to be agile within the market.
Right. I mean, we see it a lot also in innovation, in the work that we're doing in our future lab work, where this aspect of curiosity, which to me is continuous learning, right? So
Right.
what do I want to know more about? What intrigues me? What have I seen that I want to explore? This concept about how that just pure curiosity and managers who in the moment are inviting their teams or setting expectations of curiosity and intrigue to go learn more, to seek more knowledge, to use generative AI to find
Yep.
that, or to use colleagues and mentors or other types of connections to grow more in their knowledge and their capability, does bring new perspective to foster that learning culture and one of innovation. I also think it brings great habits into play, right?
Absolutely.
The kind of questions that are like, what if? Like the questioning concepts of how might we, and that fuels curiosity, that fuels that innovation spirit. So all that coming together, but it also requires, going back to what we just said, vulnerability. It
Right.
means
Yeah.
that we have managers and leaders who know they don't know it all. And they're constantly connecting with their teams to say, help me understand, or have you seen more information on this? Or what would be a new model of us tackling X, Y, or Z and engaging the full competence of the team to see new futures. So very interesting. Love it. Love it. Um, let's move now into like how learning and development um, build strong leaders, because leadership in the end is really what takes an organization forward. It's not necessarily the buildings and the structure, it's really the people leadership that make the distinctive capability for the organization. So talk about the role learning and development plays in building strong leaders that enable growth and scalability.
Well, I think leaders shape the culture. They set the direction, they drive performance. And we all know most people don't leave organizations, they leave managers, right? Or leaders within the organization. So, investing time, energy, and effort into the leaders inside the organizations really does help build not just a pipeline to have strong leaders as they advance inside the organization, but it helps the organization be ready for growth at any moment in time. Good leaders go back to, reducing turnover, team performance, right? All of those metrics But L&D's kind of responsibility, right, should be partnering with the business to identify what are those competencies and skill sets that the organization needs inside of strong leaders in the organization, and then tailoring that to equip whether we're talking emerging leaders or mature leaders with the mindset, the tools, as well as the resilience that they need because nobody's perfect. Leaders aren't going to get it perfect. L&D is not going to get it perfect in providing the perfect tools and the perfect path and all of those things. But having that partnership, being able to communicate really is the key to leadership development, driving the, if we want to say, growth engine of the organization, because leadership is about managing people, leading people, creating more leaders inside the organization. So investing in understanding what are those skill sets and competencies that are needed, not just now, but in the future, will help the organization. And again, going back to our ROI question, right? The impact that L&D has direct to leadership development, we can see a huge business impact.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'm hearing you say is that the L&D assessment around competencies and then sort of the designing of learning paths and all that really provides the blueprint, right?
Mm-hmm.
It sort of helps the organization navigate a path for how they're going to build those leaders. And so that there's what I always found when the path is clear, it's much easier to get there, right?
And people can see the direction, right?
Yeah, and they know what's ahead. They can buy in, and it's a part of how we work every day. One thing you brought up, I was going to see if you would talk a little bit more about it, is this concept of resiliency. Because in a lot of the traditional leadership models, you would have things like vision and, character, and you would have, enabling others, those types of things. But this concept of resiliency has really taken a forefront today in our environment. Talk more about that and how you see that play out in leadership development.
Well, I think it really does go hand in hand with fostering high performing teams and helping people with the rapid rate of change that is taking place in the world today. I think, given, in the last 5 years, just the evolution that has taken place and really the things that people have gone through, I see resilience as hand in hand with emotional intelligence with a leader. So, being able to obviously navigate, utilize emotional intelligence really is key. And lots of research shows success for leaders who have high emotional intelligence. But that resilience piece not only helps the leader kind of pull up their bootstraps and continue to trudge forward, but it also enables them to help their people as well, right? Because there are sometimes people don't even realize what they're going through as they're going through, and it could manifest itself as a performance issue or manifest it as L&D gets a phone call of, hey, my team needs communication training. And that might not necessarily be the root of it, but a leader that has been equipped with, that resilience and how to build that skill set in their people can make a huge difference in being able to help elevate their team.
Mm-hmm. And I also think that how you've positioned your organization at Kenco with learning and development and talent, the talent strategy and capability all being one unit is helpful. And let me just back up and talk about that for a second, because I think oftentimes leaders who have the greatest levels of resiliency, when you think about them, they've encountered unexpected situations. They've gone into had to lead units and teams where they didn't have a lot of experience there. They've had to learn along the way. They've had to build capability and muscle just in the moment, try things, experiment, learn, and adapt. And so oftentimes in the talent world, we can look at succession planning and give leaders new opportunities to experiment and lead in different units, building their adaptivity and building their ability to learn quickly, to lead teams quickly, and almost using both of those levers to help with resiliency, the skill building, right, and the cultural learning,
Absolutely.
along with new talent assignments and like stretch assignments. Also, I think putting those two together, you guys were brilliant to do that and keep them very closely tied at Kinco under your leadership. So, all right. So we have a comment coming in from Andre saying she's giving you a big compliment. You're about what you do. And he said, I couldn't agree more that the frontline leaders play a crucial role in bridging the gap between learning and development and team members. More importantly, though, Andre notes, is that having an organization that actively supports L&D programs is a true differentiator. It not only fosters growth, but also helps in developing strong and effective leaders. Before we go into our last question, I just want to talk about that. How do you get the support, right? You've been a master at that. How do you ensure that there's great leadership and business support for L&D?
Yeah, so I think it does boil down to being able to communicate that impact and to be able to, in essence, have a seat at the table and have strong programs with very detailed objectives within those programs, those learning objectives that can be tied back to what the business outcome, what the business outcomes are and what is it that the business needs. I think, being able to tell that story is extremely important. And then being able to, communicate to all leaders inside the organization just what the research shows us, what the data shows us, because, in business, we want to see numbers, right? And there's lots of data, lots of numbers out there that really does support L&D and the growth of individuals, connecting it to so many different things. But it's how do you tell that story and who are you telling it to, I think is the important piece too.
Really great advice. Thank you. That leads me kind of to our final question that we're going to explore today, and that's really around preparing how L&D prepares the workforce for future challenges. And that's a little bit to the data you're talking about, just
right.
Gaining buy-in. And I know that our frontline executives and leaders throughout the company feel the pressure of staff and being short-staffed and having people who are well-equipped and trained. So talk about how you foster that connection between L&D and equipping the organization with the talent they need.
Yeah, I think this is such an important piece of looking at what are we doing now to help people for the future. And there's lots of articles out there. I think future proofing was one term that I heard or read about, giving people the skill set to future proof their ability to contribute inside the organization. I think in order to truly foster kind of the mindset of curiosity and experimentation, right, inside of an organization, is that we have to actually equip people with what I like to call change ready skills. So not just skill ready, not, a reskilling or upskilling, but change is here to stay and change is happening more rapidly. So if we can equip people with the ability to be agile and then have learning programs and learning systems that are agile as well, so that they can quickly respond to what are the emerging needs within the organization, within the operation. And that really goes to tailoring the programs to the organization. And I know in the L&D space, sometimes it's really difficult, especially if the L&D team is very, very lean and there's not the bandwidth to completely tailor programs. But I think having those conversations with operational leaders to truly identify what those competencies are and pinpointing specifically on what's going to make the biggest impact will help our people with that kind of change ready skill set that's going to prepare them for whatever's in the future.
Right. I love this concept around tailoring and really making the case for it, because it's so easy today to think we're going to go drive through window and pick a number 1 and a number 4 and it's going to meet all of our needs, right? But what do we do as humans? We say, no, with the number 1, no pickle, no onion, or whatever. I mean, we all want to customize. But the real case is not just on personal preference, and like people feel frustrated when they have to go through things that they don't really need or want to learn. But the concept of speed, right? And this concept that today we have such a limited amount of time to pull away from actually performing the business to learning to be better at the business, that if we don't tailor or customize these learning opportunities, we're really wasting time. It means we're wasting money.
Right.
So, it is a balance. I know there are some things off the shelf that just plug and play and it makes sense, but I love the fact that you've talking about this from a portfolio standpoint and making sure that you tailor, as you said, or customize where you need to make sure that you're getting the best return on your
Absolutely.
best return. So as we kind of wrap up today, any last comments on guidance on L&D or leading in the arena?
Well, I think for all of us, right, because we are leaders in our own, life and our own areas, regardless of whether you're leading people, I just challenge everybody at the end of the day just to ask yourself the one question, what did you learn today? And I think that just continues to foster, right, the mindset of learning. And we can learn something from everybody we meet and in every situation we encounter that we can learn something.
Fabulous. What a great note to end
Yeah.
on. Thank you so much, Dr. Van Thiel, for being with us today. We have a lot more events coming up in our webinar podcast series. So check us out at bridgeinnovate.com/events. We'd love to see all of you again here. If any of you would like to get the recording, don't worry. It will be posted on our podcast, Leaders in the Arena, and under stories under the Bridge Innovate website in just a couple days. Thank you, Jonna, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much for the invite.